The human heart is born seeking belonging with the same desperation lungs seek air. It reaches for warmth, for safety, for acceptance. A child does not arrive into this world with walls built around their soul. They are open, beautifully fragile, achingly hungry for love. When that love is withheld, or worse, when it's replaced with resentment, with barely concealed disdain, the child does not merely feel unloved. They feel fundamentally, irredeemably unworthy of love. And that difference is everything. Because unloved is a condition, a circumstance that might change. But unworthy, that becomes an identity, a truth carved into bone, whispered with every heartbeat. I am not enough. I have never been enough. I will never be enough. Psychologists have spent decades studying the profound, lasting impact of childhood rejection and neglect. John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, wrote that a child's first bonds form the blueprint, the foundational architecture for all future relationships. When those bonds are warm and secure, the child grows with confidence, with an unshakable sense that the world is fundamentally safe. When they are cold, hostile, or simply absent, the child internalizes that rejection like poison, carrying it into every corner of their life, into every relationship they'll ever attempt. The unwanted child becomes the adult who still flinches even when no one is raising a hand. They become the person who apologizes for existing, who shrinks in rooms they have every right to occupy, who hears criticism in neutral words and sees abandonment in temporary distance. And here's what makes it even more heartbreaking, more psychologically complex. The unwanted child often doesn't even realize they were unwanted. Not consciously, not in words they can speak aloud. Because to a child, parents are not just caregivers. They are not just flawed human beings making mistakes. Parents are reality itself. They are gods. They are the truth tellers of worth. If a parent shows disdain, the child's mind doesn't think, my parent is wounded, my parent is struggling, my parent is wrong. No, the child thinks, I must be flawed. I must be broken. I must deserve this. Their mind bends and twists to protect the bond, to preserve the illusion of safety. The pain becomes self-blame. The rejection becomes self-identity. I am the problem. I have always been the problem. This is why unwanted children often grow into adults who struggle with the same quiet, persistent questions that follow them through decades like shadows. Am I enough? Do I deserve love? Why does connection feel so terrifyingly difficult? Why do I sabotage good things? Why do I feel like an imposter in my own life? One of the cruelest, most psychologically damaging aspects of being the unwanted child is comparison. When love is unevenly distributed among siblings like rations during famine, the unwanted child notices. Oh, they notice everything. They notice who gets praised for small victories and who gets criticized for the same. They notice who gets celebrated, who gets held with softness, whose tears are dried with tenderness, and whose are met with irritation. They notice that when it comes to them, the tone changes. The whole frequency of affection shifts downward. It's not always dramatic. It doesn't have to be violent to be devastating. It can be subtle, less eye contact, less patience, less celebration of their small victories, less interest in their inner world. A birthday cake that's slightly smaller. A hug that ends a second too soon. A proud moment met with distraction instead of joy. But to the child's nervous system, which is designed to detect threats to attachment with ruthless precision, it is unmistakable. Their body knows before their mind can articulate it. I am not wanted here. I am not loved the way they are loved. This kind of environment conditions the child to expect rejection even in objectively safe places. A teacher's constructive criticism feels like condemnation. A friend's cancellation of plans feels like abandonment. A romantic partner's bad day feels like proof of what they always suspected. I am not wanted. I will never truly be wanted. Studies in developmental psychology confirm this devastating reality. Children who experience parental rejection consistently score lower on measures of self-esteem and significantly higher in anxiety, depression, and other psychological symptoms. But it doesn't stop there. The damage goes deeper. Rejection fundamentally impacts how the brain processes social cues. Brain imaging studies show that adults who experience childhood rejection have heightened activity in threat detection areas of the brain when viewing neutral or even positive social interactions. In other words, the unwanted child grows into an adult who sees rejection even where it does not exist. Their lens of perception is permanently tinted. The filter of childhood colors every single frame of adulthood. Now, here's something both fascinating and tragic. Many unwanted children develop what psychologists call compensatory strategies, elaborate, exhausting attempts to earn the love that was denied to them. Some become perfectionists, driving themselves to the edge of breakdown, believing that flawless achievement will finally make them worthy of love. They become straight A students who still feel like failures. They become successful professionals who still feel like frauds. Others become people pleasers, contorting themselves into whatever shape might gain approval, losing themselves completely in the process. They say yes when they mean no. They silence their own needs. They become chameleons, terrified that showing their true self will confirm everyone's worst suspicions. And some go the opposite route, adopting rebellion as armor, pushing others away before they can be pushed first. They become the one who leaves before they can be left. They become emotionally unavailable, cynical, building walls so high that love can't get in, but neither can any more pain. But underneath all these strategies, perfection, rebellion, compliance, lies the same festering wound. I was not accepted as I was. My authentic self was not enough. Here's the tragedy. Perfection, rebellion, compliance. These are masks. They are survival mechanisms, brilliant adaptations to impossible circumstances. But they are not identities. They are not the truth of who you are. Yet the unwanted child often forgets this crucial distinction. They confuse the mask with the self. They live for decades, sometimes their entire lives, under the crushing weight of a role they never consciously chose, serving a sentence for a crime they didn't commit. Why does this matter so urgently? Why should we care about this invisible wound? Because silence creates repetition. Unspoken pain does not disappear. It doesn't fade with time like old photographs. It hides. It festers. It shapes choices from the shadows. For example, an unwanted child often unconsciously chooses romantic partners who recreate the exact same emotional dynamic they grew up with. Critical, withholding, emotionally unavailable, impossible to please, because it feels familiar. The brain, in its strange wisdom, gravitates toward what it knows, even when what it knows is harmful, even when what it knows is killing them slowly. This is how the cycle repeats across generations. Not because anyone wants it to, not because people are evil, but because unhealed patterns echo forward through time like sound waves that never stop, touching child after child after child. Let's look at this from a different angle, biology. When a child feels rejected, their nervous system doesn't interpret it as emotional discomfort. It interprets it as a threat to survival. Because for a human child, rejection from caregivers historically meant death. Our ancestors who didn't care about rejection didn't survive. So stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, flood the child's small body. And when this happens not once, not twice, but repeatedly, chronically, over years, this constant stress response literally reshapes brain pathways. Research from neuroscience shows that chronic childhood rejection is linked to heightened, almost frantic activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and significantly reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, which regulates emotional responses and rational thinking. What does this mean in daily life? What does this look like at age 35? It means the unwanted child grows up hyper-alert, constantly scanning every environment for signs of rejection like a soldier scanning for threats. It means they may overreact to small slights, not because they want to, not because they're crazy or too sensitive, but because their nervous system has been trained that way. Survival required it. It means peace feels foreign and uncomfortable. It means chaos feels familiar and almost comforting. It means they feel most like themselves when everything is falling apart. And yet, here is the paradox, the unexpected gift hidden in trauma. The unwanted child often becomes remarkably sensitive to the emotions of others. They can read a room with uncanny accuracy. They sense moods before words are spoken, detect lies before they're told, feel tension before it becomes visible. This is not magic. This is not a superpower. This is survival. When your safety depended on predicting rejection, on knowing which version of your parent would walk through the door that day, you learned to become a master of perception. You had to. Here's the tragedy most people miss, the pain that's hardest to validate. The unwanted child is not always visibly mistreated. There are no bruises to photograph, no broken bones to set, no obvious scars to point to in court. Sometimes, often, they grow up in families that look completely normal from the outside. There are birthday parties with balloons. There are family vacations with smiling photos. There is even laughter echoing through the house. But inside, beneath the performance, the unwanted child feels unseen, perpetually excluded, fundamentally wrong. Like there's a party happening and they weren't invited to their own life. This invisibility can hurt even more than open hostility because there's no clear proof. There's nothing they can point to and say, "See, look at this. This is why I feel this way. This is the evidence." So they question themselves. They doubt their own memory, their own perception, their own sanity. They think, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm just too sensitive. Maybe I'm making it all up. Maybe I'm the problem. Gaslighting is not always intentional. It can be built into the very structure of a family dynamic, woven into its fabric so tightly that no one even notices it's there. This internalized doubt follows them into adulthood like a shadow they can't shake. They might achieve tremendous success, degrees, careers, wealth, build relationships, even create families of their own. But deep down, underneath every achievement, they carry an ache that whispers relentlessly, "Something is fundamentally wrong with me. Everyone can see it but me. I'm a fraud, and one day they'll all figure it out." Fast forward. The unwanted child is now 30 or 40 or 50. They may not think of themselves as the unwanted child anymore. That boy, that girl, they feel like a different person, someone from a story that happened to someone else. But the echoes remain. They always remain. They show up in relationships. Fear of abandonment so intense it becomes suffocating, difficulty trusting even trustworthy people, an almost magnetic pull toward emotionally unavailable partners who recreate that familiar ache. They show up in careers, overworking to the point of exhaustion, fearing failure more than death, doubting their worth even after undeniable achievements, waiting for someone to expose them as the imposter they believe they are. They show up in self-talk, harsh, unforgiving, brutal, echoing the voices they grew up with, now internalized, now coming from inside their own head. The cruelest parent becomes the voice in their mind. This is why healing is not about erasing the past. You cannot delete memory. You cannot undo what happened. Healing is about understanding the past differently. Seeing the patterns clearly, really seeing them, is the first step in breaking them. Let's pause here and ask the deepest question. Why does rejection cut so impossibly deep? Why does being the unwanted child shape an entire life so profoundly that 50 years later, the wound is still tender? Because love is not optional for a child. Love is oxygen. Acceptance is food. Belonging is shelter. Without it, the soul does not just ache. It suffocates. It starves. It freezes in the cold. And unlike physical needs, hunger, thirst, cold, emotional deprivation is invisible. There are no bruises to heal, no broken bones to mend. Only a quiet, relentless erosion of the self, like water wearing away stone, day after day after day. Philosopher Soren Kierkegaard wrote about despair as the sickness unto death, the soul's condition of being unable to become itself, trapped in a prison of its own making. For the unwanted child, despair begins not with grand tragedies, not with dramatic events, but with small daily dismissals. A sigh, a look away, a silence where words should be, a coldness where warmth should naturally flow. And from these moments, these tiny, seemingly insignificant moments, an identity is formed. I am unwanted. I am unworthy. I am wrong. But here's the hidden truth, the secret that changes everything. The identity of the unwanted child is not the essence of the child. It is a scar, not the skin itself. And scars, while permanent in history, do not have to dictate destiny. The unwanted child does not only carry wounds. They also carry gifts. Their sensitivity, that hypervigilance that once meant survival, can become profound empathy. Their loneliness can become creativity, art, vision. Their resilience, born from surviving rejection every single day, can become extraordinary courage in the face of life's inevitable storms. History is full of people who transformed rejection into vision. Many great artists, writers, thinkers, and leaders were once children who felt profoundly unwanted. They turned their pain into fuel, their alienation into insight, their wounds into wisdom. This is not to glorify suffering. This is not to say the pain was worth it or necessary, but it is to point to a profound possibility. The unwanted child can grow into an adult who sees the world with unusual clarity precisely because they were forced to question belonging from the very start. We've traced the roots of the unwanted child, the early rejection, the quiet, devastating comparisons, the invisible wounds that stretch into adulthood like shadows that never quite disappear. But the story does not end there, because human beings are not just the products of their past. We are also the authors of our future. And the unwanted child, though shaped, though scarred, though bent by rejection, can still rewrite their story. The first truth is this: yes, the cycle can be broken, but it does not break by accident. It does not break by hoping or wishing or waiting. It breaks by awareness, by seeing clearly, by naming truthfully, by choosing differently. Healing begins when the adult recognizes and acknowledges the child they once were. Not to blame parents endlessly, not to wallow in old wounds like a shrine to suffering, but to see clearly, without flinching, what actually happened. Because what is not seen is repeated. What is denied remains alive in the shadows, pulling strings, making choices, sabotaging joy. Psychologists call this process reparenting. It means offering to yourself, as an adult, the care, the compassion, the unconditional acceptance that you never received as a child. It sounds simple. It sounds like self-help cliché, but it is profound. Reparenting is saying to yourself, out loud, with conviction, until your nervous system believes it: you are worthy. You are lovable. You belong. Your existence is not a burden. You are not too much and not too little. You are exactly enough. Words you may never have heard. Words that your nervous system desperately, achingly needs to absorb like water in a desert. Naming the experience is a powerful, transformative step. When you can finally say, to yourself, to a therapist, to a trusted friend, I grew up as the unwanted one. I was the child who didn't matter. Something fundamental shifts. The fog begins to clear. Because what was once felt as vague, diffuse shame, something is wrong with me, is revealed as a wound with a specific cause. And wounds with causes can be treated, can be healed. Studies on trauma show that simply putting experiences into words, narrative, story, language, reduces their emotional intensity. Language brings order to chaos. Naming transforms a private, unspeakable ache into a shared human reality. It allows the unwanted child, now adult, to understand with their whole being: this was not my fault. This was something that happened to me. I am not defective. I was failed. That shift from I am broken to I was broken into is everything. Attachment theory tells us that early rejection wires the brain to expect more rejection. The neural pathways are literally carved by experience. But here's the beautiful, scientifically proven good news. Attachment styles are not fixed. They are not your destiny. With intentional, consistent relationships, whether through therapy, deep friendships, or genuinely loving partnerships, people can build what psychologists call earned secure attachment. This means that even if you began life drowning in doubt, even if love felt like a language you could never learn, you can relearn it. You can teach your nervous system a new truth. The brain can form new pathways. Neurons that fire together, wire together. New experiences create new architecture. Science confirms what the human heart has always hoped. It is never too late to feel safe. It is never too late to belong. But healing requires something that feels impossible at first: self-compassion. Dr. Kristen Neff's groundbreaking research on self-compassion shows that treating ourselves with kindness in moments of pain dramatically reduces anxiety, depression, and shame. Yet for the unwanted child, compassion toward themselves can feel absolutely foreign, like speaking a language they've never heard. Criticism feels familiar. Harshness feels normal. Self-punishment feels deserved. To practice self-compassion is to break an old pattern. It is to say, with revolutionary defiance, I will not treat myself the way I was once treated. That cycle ends here, with me now. And each small act of gentleness toward yourself, resting when tired instead of pushing through, forgiving a mistake instead of spiraling into shame, speaking kindly to yourself instead of with that familiar cruelty, becomes a quiet rebellion against the old identity. Remember how we said the unwanted child becomes finely attuned to others' emotions? That same sensitivity, when healed, when channeled consciously, becomes an extraordinary gift. Empathy, intuition, depth of understanding, emotional intelligence. These qualities make for remarkable friends, partners, artists, therapists, and leaders. What once was survival becomes strength. What was once a wound becomes wisdom. The unwanted child, in other words, is not doomed to be broken forever. They are invited to transform, to turn rejection into insight, silence into expression, pain into profound human connection. But what about when the unwanted child becomes a parent themselves? What happens then? Here lies both danger and opportunity. Many adults who were once rejected make a sacred vow. I will never let my children feel what I felt. Never. Some succeed beautifully, pouring unconditional love into their children, breaking the chain for good, ending the generational curse. Others struggle, not from lack of love, but because unhealed wounds echo forward. They overcorrect. They project. They unconsciously repeat patterns they swore they'd never repeat. But again, awareness is the key. When a parent recognizes, truly recognizes, I was once the unwanted child, they can pause. They can choose differently in that moment. They can ask, am I projecting my pain onto my child, or am I choosing differently this time? That pause, that sacred space of awareness between trigger and response, is where cycles end. Let's step back one more time to the philosophical. Why does being unwanted cut so deep? Why does it reshape entire lives? Because human beings are fundamentally, biologically wired for belonging. Aristotle called us social animals. Modern neuroscience confirms it with brain scans and hormones. Our brains are literally designed to connect. Loneliness registers in the brain as physical pain. Rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical injury. So when a child is rejected, it does not just hurt emotionally. It hurts biologically. The pain is real. The wound is real. A wound in the most fundamental fabric of human existence, the need to belong. But here's the hopeful truth that changes everything. Belonging can be rebuilt. Not always with the family of origin. Sometimes that bridge is too burned, too toxic, too dangerous to cross again. But with chosen family, with friends who become family, with communities where you are seen and valued for who you actually are, not who you pretend to be. Belonging is not limited to blood. It can be chosen, created, cultivated. So what is the transformation? What does healing actually look like? It is the shift from victimhood to authorship. The unwanted child begins life as a victim of circumstance, powerless, trapped. But healing invites them to become a creator of circumstance, a conscious author of their own story. Instead of asking, why was I unwanted? What's wrong with me? The healed adult asks. What kind of life do I now choose to build? Who do I want to become? What do I want to create? This is not denial of pain. This is not toxic positivity or spiritual bypassing. This is integration of pain. It is saying, with full awareness, yes, I was rejected. Yes, it shaped me. Yes, it hurt more than words can express. But it does not define me. It is not the end of my story. That is the turning point. That is the moment everything changes. To ground this in the practical, here are concrete steps any unwanted child, now adult, can take. 1. Awareness through journaling. Write out specific memories of feeling unwanted. Then write the truth beneath them. It was not my fault. I was worthy of love then, and I am worthy now. Their inability to love me was about them, not about me. 2. Seek therapeutic relationships. Find a skilled therapist or cultivate safe friendships where consistent acceptance can literally rewire your nervous system to expect safety instead of rejection. 3. Practice boundaries. If old family dynamics continue to wound you, you have permission to set boundaries. Healing does not require endless exposure to rejection. Sometimes distance is the most loving choice. 4. Engage in self-expression. Art, writing, music, dance. These outlets turn silent pain into visible creation. Expression is the opposite of erasure. Your story deserves to be told. 5. Daily compassion practice. Every single day, speak to yourself as you would to a frightened child in pain. This simple shift, repeated over months and years, reshapes identity at the deepest level. The unwanted child begins life marked by rejection, defined by absence, shaped by silence. But rejection need not be the final story. History shows us countless examples of individuals who began unwanted, yet transformed their lives into something beautiful, meaningful, powerful. Some became visionaries who changed the world. Some became healers who transformed others' pain. Some simply built quiet, loving families of their own, breaking the cycle, choosing differently, ending the curse. The common thread? They refused to let rejection remain the final word. They chose to write a different ending. And maybe that is the lesson for all of us. Even if you were once the unwanted child, even if you still carry the ache of being unseen, unvalued, unloved, you are not condemned to live there forever. You are not sentenced to a life of pain. You are not required to remain small, to keep apologizing for existing, to keep proving your worth to people who will never see it. You can choose a different ending. You can choose to belong, first to yourself, and then to others who see you truly, who love you wholly, who celebrate your existence instead of tolerating it. So let us return to the image we began with. The little boy, Oliver, at the table, staring at his plate, moving food in circles, feeling invisible, feeling wrong, feeling like an unwanted guest in his own home. Perhaps that boy is still within you. Perhaps that girl still waits in your heart to be seen, to be held, to be told she matters. The invitation now is simple but profound. Look at them. See them. Tell them what no one else did. Tell them, you are worthy. You are enough. You belong. You always have. Your existence is not a burden. It is a gift. You are not too much and not too little. You are exactly, perfectly enough. Because healing begins the moment the unwanted child is finally met with love. Not borrowed love, not conditional love, not love that must be earned through perfection, but love that says, simply and absolutely, you exist, therefore you matter. You breathe, therefore you belong. You are here, therefore you are wanted. And maybe, just maybe, that is the deepest truth. The unwanted child is not truly unwanted. They are simply waiting, waiting for someone, perhaps even themselves, to finally say yes.